kind of go back 2011. So your activism with missing Black women, you recently shared a post, right, of a St. Louis teenager, Mika Atherton, right, on Facebook. So for those who don't know, Mika Atherton was 17 years old. She went missing October 8th. Then the family pretty much reported her, by October 15th, like, yo, she's, we need people to kind of help. So let's go back to 2011 with Phoenix Coldon story. Can you talk about her going missing and what really sparked you and your concern and your passion to find her?
Yeah. So 2011, yeah, when I heard the story of Phoenix specifically, and another sister, Anna Brown, didn't go missing, but real quick, Anna went to the hospital. They released her, said they didn't find anything wrong. She complained about leg cramps. She got arrested. She ended up dying in Richmond Heights jail. She had blood clots that passed from her legs to her lungs. So it was simultaneously, I kind of heard her story and Phoenix's story. And at that particular time, I was definitely starting to get my feet wet around like my activism and getting more politicized in that way of just work I was doing within community. And when I heard those two stories, I mean, for me, it really was like I didn't want to just talk about it. Like, I talk about a lot of stuff like we all do. Yeah. But I didn't want to just talk about it. I wanted to, actively do something. And so the biggest thing that stuck out as far as with Phoenix is, her mother just speaking about how it was just very difficult for her to get coverage of her story. And that then led me to think more about that around just Black women, Black girls, Black men, black people, period, when we go missing. And, at that particular time, it isn't what social media is now. So, a lot of more stories get shared due to social media. At that particular time in 2011, 2012, that wasn't the same as how it looks now. So hearing her talk, the only publication that did kind of, touch on it was Black and Missing. But as far as like other major mainstream media sources, like they weren't picking up the story. And so, like I said, it made me start thinking about just this in a broader sense as well. And how I could, what could I do? How could I do it? And so at that point, luckily I was, tapped in a little bit with the art community, had friends that were either poets or artists, and that was my way of really a way to address it was through art. So the very first thing I did was, first, before that, talking to my homegirl about it. That's how I came up with the name Invisible No More. Shout out to Ashley. She's the one that gave me the name. And I reached out to both Anna's family and Phoenix's family. Didn't get a hold of Anna Brown's family, but did get a hold of Phoenix's mother, and just told her. And also at that particular point, unfortunately, she had dealt with a lot of folks who were scamming or, giving them information that was inaccurate, wasn't true. People are heartless sometimes, like, just sharing things, giving them false leads, just a lot of foolishness. So, she was a little apprehensive because she didn't know me. But I tried my best to just let her know who I was, what I was doing, what my intention was. And so the very first event I did essentially was asking folks to come out to just speak about this. This is what's happening. This is what has happened to these two women, bringing in art, poetry, elements to that. Funny, MK, I actually had MK, I asked MK to come and kind of like keynote, like speak on this. And Phoenix's mother came, and the funds that was raised from that event just went also Phoenix's family. Like I said, Anna Brown's family, unfortunately, I didn't get a hold of. So those funds went, and it was a very modest. It wasn't a huge turnout, but it was very impactful. And the people that were in the room were just very much invested in Phoenix's story. How we can get more of this, information out about her story, connecting with her mother, wanting to support her mother, support her family. And so from that point on, really, it just kind of grew more into itself where I was just, well, first, let me back up a little. I was kind of like, yeah, I'm not really finna, do this type of thing anymore where I'm trying to like put together, organize, curate something. At that time, I didn't call myself a curator.
Yeah.
And folks in the room were like, no, like you absolutely got to keep doing this, because, I was a little kind of like I get now over the course of my activism work, a little bit of, hopelessness and like you wish more people will respond to it, right?
Absolutely,
right?
Yeah.
But I was reminded very quickly, like, no, like you can't stop doing this. Like this is something that is needed. And so from that point on, here I am now, like 11 years later. And, but with Phoenix, continuously to just lift up her story, share what happened to her, note that, she's still missing. And of course, over the years, there has been, more coverage of her story on national media, things like that.
Yeah.
So that's great. That's, amazing. But at the same time, she is still missing. There's still really no more information when she left her home saying she'll be back soon to now.
Yeah.
And so that is a familiar story for a lot of missing folks, specifically missing Black people, specifically Black women and girls. And again, for me, it was to really also, outside of speaking to Phoenix specifically, but again, it was about speaking to this broader thing around what happens, who cares about us, when we go missing. And of course, there's been plenty of great articles and literature and things that have been written and put out speaking to this, speaking about the invisibility, speaking about the lack of coverage, speaking about, the stats that we see, how many, not just Black women and Black girls, but how many Black men are missing in this country. And who really cares? Who really cares enough to really figure out, what has happened to them.
Yeah.
And not just tying it to like a stereotype or stigma, like, oh, he must have just been murdered. But even if he was murdered, right?
Right.
The family, loved ones, community deserves to know.
They definitely deserve to know.
Yeah. So that has been something that has continued to that I hold very closely. And with Invisible No More, outside of the missing Black women and girl piece, it also became, it kind of evolved more into really just speaking to the plight of Black women and girls, period. So also speaking to like violence against Black women and girls. So state-sanctioned violence, communal violence, and what that means, right? And how sometimes that is a contributor to when folks go missing, right? It's particularly Black women and Black girls. So yeah, Phoenix definitely, Phoenix's story and Anna's story probably definitely pushed me more into how hard I go around centering a lot of what I do, centering Black women and Black girls within that conversation is very much what I center a lot with any type of work that I do. So, yeah.
Yeah. Kudos to you. I think at the end of the day, the efforts of Phoenix's mother, her parents, their family, and you advocated for a national call to now where we can see documentaries a little bit. We can see some major news articles that was released after the efforts of your advocacy with that. When you heard like, oh, this is not being covered over the news right now. And I just remember being on Facebook, just being on social media heavy, seeing you out here in the streets saying like, yo, we need to find her, continuously posting and saying, yo, how can we find her? This is crazy. And it's a really sad thing when somebody do go missing and you don't find them, because now it's just a mystery. Like, what really happened? It's no way like this world, all these cameras and things and how technology is connected where we can't find somebody, right? But the reality is, it happens. For people that's listening and want to know more, man, statistically, right, it's almost 100,000 Black women went missing last year. Let me just take a pause. Almost 100,000 Black women went missing, Black women and girls. So, that's personally, man, I would be hurt if anybody I knew, a family member, man, would be missing like that, and we trying to find, and the investigation is like year after year after year. So Phoenix has still not been found. It's still a mystery. Do you know if the case is still like open, or have they just kind of concluded it?
That's a good question. I know that it kind of changed hands between like county and because because
it was like an East St. Louis. It was like her car was found.
For folks who may not know, her car, she left. They lived in incorporated St. Louis County, but her vehicle was found in East St. Louis, running with the door open. Her bag was in the car, and Phoenix's family didn't know that her car was found until much, much later, after she had been reported missing. So just all of these different pieces that were just her family was unaware of, which gets to another piece too around just how the system just works when it comes to just missing people, period. You have to wait a certain amount of time before they even deem someone could potentially be missing. Then if you're an adult, it could be looked at as like, oh, well, they may have just left on their own accord, right? Yeah. And again, when it comes to, race, ethnicity, gender, demographic, class, like all of those different factors matters into how much they care about it, how much effort is put into
time.
It. And then
time and resources.
Yeah, and then that is at least I know when I was more into like digging into like studying and like being more invested in all of this, I know that, and I'm sure it probably is still true. Usually that department around missing persons is usually a department isn't funded as much, probably doesn't understaffed, like all of those different pieces which matter too, around how actively someone could be actually working on a case before it goes cold, and if it's a cold case, that ever gets opened back up. So I'm not totally sure where it stands now. I know that Phoenix's mother is like, she will forever go hard, as she should, right? Yeah. For her daughter and figuring all this out.
And how to bring her home and what's going on. You know what? Once again, like I think your advocacy with that was muchly needed. And for women out there, stay safe. You know what I'm saying? Be safe. I know a lot of the correlation with missing women and things like that correlated with sex trafficking is a big thing. So just stay safe. If you got somebody that's missing, man, just put the information out, and hopefully, man, you can find them. Continuing with your advocacy, right? From police brutality to racism, white supremacy, women's rights to homelessness in the city of St. Louis. What ultimately brought you to the mindset to wanting to speak out against injustice?
Funny, I was just sharing this. Probably my mother.
Okay.
She teases me and she calls me like her militant child. I'm my mother's only child. I'm not my father's. I'm my father's youngest. I'm my mother's only. But from my mother was a St. Louis public schools teacher. She's retired now.
Okay.
But she was in the union. So she took me to my very first picket line. Like my mom took me when I was like 7. When St. Louis public school teachers went on strike. And she was always the shop steward at all her schools that she worked at. Very, very, very active union member. Would take me to union meetings. Like looking back now, it's like, wow, thank you for that. At the time, I'm like, this is crazy, right? Like,
and don't we all when we younger, our moms, our like parents is doing stuff, and then we be like, man.
She's taking me to meetings, and they're like, going in about, but I get it now, like fighting for better working conditions, right? Especially as teachers, which teachers are always fighting for that, unfortunately. But, her explaining to me about using your voice, how you advocate for yourself. Like I remember very vividly her, them having blue flu days. So like days where, the teachers didn't go into work, and them calling each other around, they're staying home, and her explaining why that was to me. So it was her essentially that gave me my first glimpse into like what it means to advocate for yourself and to use your voice. And then my mom being a teacher also, of course, she was always, it was always something educational I had to do. Books, film. If we're on vacation, we were still going to find something educational to do in the summer.
You went to college for education, right?
I did. I went to school for elementary education, which I thought I was
so that's do. She's a heavy influence on your life. And
what so on my mom's side, it's a whole bunch of educators. So education was a thing, which, again, now looking back, I'm so appreciative of that. But, when you're younger, it's like, yo, can you chill for a little bit on this, right? But it was her. It was her. And her, coming from the South. My mother is originally from Arkansas. My father was originally from Mississippi, Tupelo, Mississippi. So him sharing, also him sharing his stories of being in Mississippi, his stories of migrating here to St. Louis, different things about him just being a black man. Like my parents lived in South County. They moved to Ferguson. They got their first house when I turned 1. But before that, they lived in South County. And I remember my father telling me at the time he would drive into the city because my father worked at a steel mill, so blue-collar worker. Yeah. But he would tell me about how he would get trailed by the same police officer every morning. Every morning when he would leave, pull out the apartment complex to drive into the city, that he would get trailed pretty much the whole ride into the city. And me being very curious about that. Me thinking about us going down south, because we went down south a lot. Again, another thing that I appreciate now. But younger, sometimes it's like we're going back to the country, but I appreciate it was some of the best times of my life. But driving down there and them explaining to me about sundown towns, about some towns that we weren't going to stop in, or we were only going to stop during the daytime. Me seeing the way in which some white folk would look at us, and me being curious to why that was, and asking the questions, and my parents being pretty honest about it. They didn't really sugarcoat it. And so I think all of that just sparked my curiosity, and then I just started having that curiosity on my own. So I began being very curious around just movements, period. Just movements and people that were just advocating for themselves. I was very much curious and drawn to civil rights movement, but particularly the Black Power movement, Black Panthers. I just was. I remember asking my mom in middle school to buy me this book on the Panthers, which I later found out was like an adult grade book, but I asked for it and was just very much drawn to that. First off, aesthetically, I'm be honest, just how cool Black people looked in that time from photos and things that I saw. Like, wow, this looks like amazing.
The black leather, the new age of let's rock our own hair now. Let's do this.
That blackness aesthetic was just
beautiful. Was just
talented.
It
was something that was just, I was just